I bought 21 properties right off the bat and
Holy
another
smoke.
5 more off that piece of mail. And so we made 80 grand off of that whole mail campaign, that first set of
One
mail.
campaign.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of firsts happened on this property for me. I go to the property, the neighbor had been paying the taxes on it for 3 generations as well, that they had been their family, because they owned a section right next to it. He pulls a gun on me as I go up to knock on his door. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. My gun's in the car. Can I at least go get it and make it a fair fight? Because he didn't know I saw him put it in his back pocket.
Podcast. This is going to be a fun one. Today I'm interviewing the man, the myth, the legend, Justin Sliva. He's kind of like me, where when you ask him what he does, there's no short or quick answer, right? He's like, what business do you want me to talk about? What entity should I mention? You know, we've got funds, we've got education companies, we've got land flipping companies, we got funding companies, right?
Yeah.
So I'll let you get into those. Hopefully we can touch a little bit on each as we go through the podcast. But I've kind of watched your ascent, you know, from afar, and got to connect, you know, recently, and actually get to know you, and got a lot of respect for kind of the come up, you know, the come up story, and watching how things have went for you, and also watching how you just don't like just rest on your laurels. You're not just complacent. Like you're kind of always innovating, always looking to what's next, and always challenge yourself, you know, and growing, man. So, hey, dude, welcome to the show. Thanks for making time for me. Justin Sleeve, everybody.
Hey, Travis, thanks, man. And I think one of the fun things to mention is 2018, you were my first big package of notes purchase.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. I did not know that.
You remember that or not. But yeah, 2018.
I thought that was a Tuesday when we were interacting. No, I had no idea.
That was our first big package. We bought a bunch of individual ones, but that was the first package I bought. And I still have 2 or 3 of those notes. They're still paying today. And one of the things I remember, and I want to give you some credit on this, because I think it's important to, over the years, you see people come and go through this niche. And, you know, so 2018, that's when we started Plum Investment Group. One of the entities, the joint venture group that you kind of mentioned. When I got your paperwork on that, I said, man, this guy has got his dialed in. And so I want to give that kudos then, because that's 2018. We're now 2025. Yeah. So I can only imagine how much more dialed in your stuff is. And like you said, we've got to spend time together here this last summer and get to know each other a little bit better and kind of connect and kind of have those open dialogue. But I'll say that when I get asked with educators in the land space and your name gets brought up, I said, I always tell the story. 2018, I saw his paperwork and knew the guy knew what he's doing. So that's I want to say that's the conversations you have about people outside of the room that they're in. I think it bodes well for their type of personality thing. So you're always on my top of my list. I'm like, hey, somebody say, hey, I want to do some education with you. I've taken Travis' course. It says he's taught you everything you need to know. Now let's help dial in.
And we'll get into that, because I know obviously there's overlap, and there's people that run the circuit, right? That like me, like you don't go, I just don't want, you know, I want to get everybody's take on it. And I kind of want to like filter out the bias and the fluff, and then put together and marry all the best of each person's strategy. So we got some people that probably weren't like, hey, I didn't really like his stuff, but I like his. But more people that go, I got what I need to get from him. Now let's go ahead and go over here and get the different stuff and combine them, right? Yeah, and we'll get into that, because I've got some good stories, and they're all. That's the nice thing, is they are complementary to you too. Yeah. So, but let's back things up, like you said, to 2018. I had no idea, dude. It's all a blur, to be honest. It's like parenting. Yeah. Once they started having kids, it's just like right. It's all like there's a tornado, you know. So the years, the weeks, the months, everything kind of blends together, but. You're saying it's 2018, so I'll take any word. So I reach out to you because I remember hearing you on some podcasts, and I remember you're a railroad guy, and I know we'll get into that, man. But you're a railroad guy, and I had a specific client that was looking for a commercial property, and he wanted like to spur off. He wanted this property had because it was road frontage and it had a railroad access. And what I like to do, what I've always found, rather than pretend like I know it all or spend too much time Googling and get myself in trouble, I just go, who knows what I don't know, right? Yep. And I'd heard you talk, and I knew you had like inside knowledge, inside track on like the railroad industry, having worked that, and land, obviously, because you're in land. So I reached out for a consulting call, because that's what I do, man. Like I'll gladly cut I'll gladly cut it like a 4-figure, 5-figure check to maybe save myself 6 figures of mistakes, right? So I reach out to you and I go, hey, here's what I'm doing. Can I do what I think I can do with a spur off the railroad? And you lined me out. And ultimately it was like, no, I can't do what I had hoped I can do. But knowing that saved me from selling, you know, this buyer, this borrower, selling them a property that they wouldn't be able to do what they had intended to, which protects my reputation and also save me some money, probably, right? So that's kind of how we connected, was that consulting call, kind of picking your brain on the railroad portion of things. And then we got into talking about notes, and that was kind of my approach at the time, was building like this note empire. And yeah, I had no idea. Like you said, that was a big package for you at the time. I had no idea of that. All I knew was the check cashed. So I knew you were legit. So at the same time, it was bi-directional, right? It went both ways. Like, this guy's talking a lot. I heard him on some podcasts and stuff. All right, we'll throw this portfolio at him. And the wire came in and it cashed. So I go, okay, right. He's legit. So yeah, it goes both ways, man. I appreciate you. But that's how we connected. And then kind of, that was really it. And then didn't hear from you for years, kind of saw you from afar. Launch some other companies, launch a podcast, obviously educating. Maybe for those that, we're going to have a lot of people listening that have overlap and know both of us. But for those that don't know you, let's go back.
Yeah, man.
Kind of walk everybody through and then bring them current. Kind of just like, I know you're in Texas now. Did you grow up? Are you a Texas guy?
I live about 15 miles from where I grew up from, but it was kind of a journey to get here. So I'll say when I was 21, I worked for Wells Fargo, and I had a Group 1 license, and I had got an offer to go work for Edward Jones. And I was going through the recruitment piece, and I was at Christmas or I was at Thanksgiving, and my uncle walks in and he tells my little brother that, hey, the railroad's hiring. And mind you, I'm 21. I'm engaged. I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. I think I'm going to go work for Edward Jones and be this stockbroker. And he tells my little brother that. So I go home and I get on the internet and I'm like, okay, up.com. I put in an application. That was beginning of December. They call me and hire me in January to go be a conductor. And when I'm sitting there, the guy I'm interviewing with, he asked me some questions, and I said, well, here's my job opportunity right now with Edward Jones. They're going to pay me $55,000 a year for my first year base, and I'll probably make close to 100. And he laughed. He goes, dude, you're going to make $100,000 a year standing on your head as long as you answer the phone. He goes, you seem like you like to work. And I said, you tell a 21-year-old, all I got to do is answer the phone.
I'm 21 with no responsibilities.
Kids, I'm engaged, So I go to work for them, and I just naturally gravitated to the way it worked. My brain worked really well with the railroad. I became an engineer. I was hired as a conductor, became an engineer. In those seniority jobs, you chase your seniority around a crew district. So I ended up in Louisiana, Longview, Oklahoma as an engineer, but I was always involved in the union and the safety. And so I go to a national delegates convention, and I'm the youngest national delegate there for our union at the time. It was in Hollywood, Florida. And I watched the union vote somebody out, and the higher ups brought somebody back in around the back door. And it's a pivotal moment for me because I was sitting there thinking about it, and this is how my mind works. I see something happen, and I start chasing down the rabbits and working backwards and seeing how it would affect me. And I go, these guys didn't listen to what the group said, and we're only here if the railroad's here, because we have to pay in our dues, and that's what covers us. And we're at this really elaborate hotel. It's like a $4 million event. And I'm thinking, why are we wasting our money on this? And one of the votes was, we're going to move from every 4 years to every 5 years. That saves, for every fifth one, you got one for free, basically. And that saves the constituents. And they don't want to do that because these higher ups get a free vacation every 4 years to Hawaii, to Florida, to wherever.
How old are you at this time?
I'm like 23, 24.
And you're already kind of observing this.
Yeah,
right? It's the same reason they don't let people over 30 join the military, dude. Right? Because you start to have this, you start to see what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so I come back and I tell this manager, I said, hey, man, I think I kind of want to get into management. He knew me from being on safety teams and in the union. And he goes, dude, they started this program. It's this fast track program. You'd be perfect for it. You needed to have 4 years of seniority. Didn't matter if you had a college degree. They were going to run you through an accelerated program for basically a master's degree in railroad. So you basically lived in a pod for 4 months in Omaha. University of Omaha came in and taught you 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. And you did that for that time period. And then you ended up in your region somewhere as a manager. So I go through that, end up in Lake Jackson as a MYO. There 2 years, figure out a couple things with their programming. I'm not a programmer by any means, but I understand how the trains work. And so we adjusted some stuff, and it saved the company a couple $1 million. So I got promoted. Then I ended up in Denison, Texas.
They don't give you a percentage of that, right? You get a promotion.
Right.
Yeah, that's I've been there too, where you go, hey, I just saved you $1 million. How much do I get? And they go, well,
you got a pat on the back. And I got to move.
Right.
Yeah. I got a pat on the back and to move again. And we ended up in Denison, was there 2 years, ended up in Fort Worth for a lateral move. Then they moved us to Shreveport. We had our twins. My wife got pregnant the day I moved to Shreveport, and then she followed 8 months later on bed rest. And then we had the twins there. We were there.
What year is this, or what time is this?
2013.
2013.
So just kind of bouncing around, and I'm moving up into senior management positions. I get promoted from there to a director spot. And then I'm at UP still, and they go, hey man, my partner of mine with Plum, his wife passed away instantly, and we were both directors. His wife passes away, so I'm doing his job and my job for about 7-8 months because he's trying to figure out life now. He's got 2 small kids. And he's 10 years older than me, 12 years older than me. And they said, hey, man, you did a really good job handling his job and your job. Again, when you do a really good job, we're going to move you. So they said, you have a year left, or you have a month left on this moving package. Once you hit your year, you're going to Oakland. Congratulations, you're going to California. So I come home and tell my wife.
Well, wait a minute. California and Oakland, like 2 different things here, right? It's not like you're going to like Laguna Beach. You're going to Oakland.
Yeah. And so I'm looking at houses. I'm like, geez, these houses, at the time we lived in Louisiana, when we lived in Louisiana, we thought that was an expensive house at $300,000. But when you move back to Texas, we're used to property taxes in Texas, and they're just outrageous. Yeah. So, a $350,000 house in Louisiana costs the same as a $225,000 house in Texas because of your property taxes. So I'm looking at houses there, and they're like $1.2 to $2 million. And you don't live in Oakland. I'm going to have to drive across the bridge every day. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't know. So I tell her, and she says, I'm not moving. I'm not leaving Fort Worth again. And I go, wait, what? We agreed that we're chasing my career. She said, nah, I'm not doing it. You can go. Me and the kids are staying here. I want to be around family and friends. And I said, okay. So I made a comment to a smaller railroad, said, hey, I'm looking for something that's more permanent in Fort Worth. This is my salary request. And I knew they had a spot coming open because the guy was equal to me at a different time. He was retiring from over there. So I said, if you need somebody, let me know. Well, they called me the next day and said, hey, we got your salary met. You're good to go. When can you start? Yeah. And so I went there for 2 years. I was a chief transportation officer there. They moved into what the chief operating officer's job was, and they changed the title when I got it to a general manager's job. I was in
is that local then to Texas now, or local to even a region where we were from?
So was there about 2 years, and then I get called in. I get that dreaded Friday morning call, like, hey, we need to come see you. And I'm like, why is the CEO? Because I'm second in command. Why is the vice president of HR calling me on a Friday morning at 6 o'clock? HR is not up. The corporate office isn't up and going. We're up and running at 5, And so I'm like, okay, well, I'll swing by my way. And they're like, okay. So I swing in. It's me, her, and the CEO. And he basically says, hey, we don't want to have you here anymore. And I go, okay, well, what's going on? He's like, I don't have to tell you. The attorneys tell me I don't have to tell you anything. You just no longer have a job. But I'm a nice guy. Here's $7,000. And I'm like, yeah, $7,000 ain't going to get it done, bud. And I think he thought I was about to lose my, because I've been known to have a temper at times. And now you're taking everything from me, because when I came to that position, even though I solicited them, I still had to sign away about $500,000 in stock options from the other railroad. So I'm walking away and it's come back to zero just to stay here with my family.
No, I hear you. Like, I'm even killed until I'm not, right?
Yeah. I get it. And that's kind of the thing. And so sitting there, I go, hey man, 2 weeks ago we did an end of year review. You have that piece of paper. Remember, we both signed it. I have a copy of it, but go ahead and show that ready for court. That's going to be part of our study. We're going to look at I forgot the term I was going to use, but the term I used at the time, but discuss it, make that part of discovery, and then go ahead and keep all the records. I have a copy of them all already, but keep all the records for the discovery to show you have best ever safety, service, budget, profitability with me as this position. And we have 15 years of records, and it shows that. And I said, so this is going to come down to it's either age discrimination or there's something else going on that I don't realize. And we're going to figure that out, and you're going to have to explain it on the stand. I said, and I stayed cool the whole time. I was surprised I was able to do that, because normal Justin would have just went berserk and saw red. Yeah. But I was able to maintain that cool. He said, okay, what is it going to take for you to get out of here? And I named my price. He wrote a check, and that was that. And I can't ever badmouth him, do anything like that. So we split ways.
Yeah, that's what the NDA is. It's like, you don't get to say what that check was, what the number was, and you don't get to say anything bad about him, and you got to be okay with that. But
yeah. And so, and I at the time, there was a lot of self-loathing and pity, but I'll back up a few months before that. My partner, or my co-host on Casual Fridays, Adam, he started sending out mail and buying raw pieces of land. And so he got 5 acres for $500 back in a letter. And I said, if you can buy 5 acres for $500, I will buy every one of those you can get. And he goes, nah, man, why don't you just do it yourself? And mind you, at the time, we had an Amazon business together, and it was making a little bit of money, but it wasn't anything really to write home about. We had 3 number 1 products in those categories, and they were making like 20%. So, I mean, it was like you're carrying so much inventory, you never really saw anything every time you turned the product, right?
And it's your inputs are like your focus, your time, right? Like the activity's not worth the profitability, right?
You're exactly right. And so he said, but I don't want to do it together. I want to do it on my own, but I want to liquidate our Amazon company, both take our money, and then start doing this. And I said, okay, easy enough. I started that job at 20, just turned 22 when I started at the railroad. I got hired at 21, started at 22. And so I always did pretty well with my money. And so I had a decent nest egg to get going. Well, when we started doing that, we started buying coastal properties, sending letters out to desert squares and doing that whole rigmarole. And that was 2016, 2017. 2017 is when I got let go. We had just sent out our first big mail campaign. We sent out, at the time, big mail campaign was 3,000 pieces of mail. Yeah. And I bought 21 properties right off the bat. Holy and another God. 5 more off that piece of mail. And so we made 80 grand off of that whole mail campaign, that first set
one
of mail.
campaign.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, whoa, there's some legs to this. And so when I got let go that day, this Friday, I felt like I was like, what, the world's coming down. I gave up this hotshot career at the big railroad. I screwed myself on the small one. So I'm sitting here and I'm like, man, because I had a company car. I didn't even have a car, so I'm sitting here in this self-loathing.
I've been there. Same thing, man. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't have a car, but as I'm sitting in my $500,000 home with my feet in the pool on a Friday night, I'm like, oh, woe is me. And I'm like,
first world problems at its best, baby.
So the sun goes down and I'm watching light, and I'm supposed to go to a concert that night with a friend, and I don't go, and I'm just watching the kind of the moonlight in the pool, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, dude, you got this little business, you just made like 70 or 80 grand off of it pretty easily. Yeah. Why don't you just attack that like you did the railroad? And go for it and make that your job for the next 6 months. You got enough money right now. You have nest egg to invest, and you can get going with the rest of your money. Just put it all to work. 6 months. The old railroads already said they'd hire you back. You just have to be willing to move. So worst case scenario.
And that's the logical side. But if I've been right where you are, and there's a lot more emotional part that precedes this, right? Yeah. It was like, oh crap, right? How do I have this conversation with my wife? How does this alter my career? Looking out for new jobs, like I reek of like being laid off versus employed and trying to find something lateral or above for a little more, right? Yeah. So I know all those thoughts that run through the head before you kind of come to that like I got this, right? Yep. Before that, like I got this moment for me anyway was like a whole lot of oh no, like what do I do? How do I regroup here?
Yeah. And so you start to question, everything about yourself. Was I good enough? Did I do something wrong? What did I miss? Where were the blinds at? Because when you're a high performing individual, and I'm not saying that to be braggy about myself. I just expect more from myself than I do others. I know that when it gets tough, I'm going to do what needs to be done. And so when you miss something like that and you're going, man, how did this happen? Like, what did I miss? And I'm worried about the history, or I'm worried about the rear view. And so you've seen these memes that talk about when you get bit by a snake, you don't go chase the snake down and ask him why he bit you. Right. You go get the help you need and you move forward. And so, and I realized in that moment, that's what I was doing. And I said, you know what? I can get up at 5. I've been doing it for, 8, 9 years now. And I've been getting my handed to me on conference calls after that because I needed to know every intricate detail of my business and the businesses underneath me, whether that was the big yard and then all the satellite yards around us for an entire service unit to the regional people. And so I said, I can do this. But what I don't know is all the stuff I don't know, and how can I make this better? So I spent an hour every morning reading on something that had to do with commercial lending, business, real estate, just going down blog after blog. Like somebody would say, hey, wrap a loan. Well, I don't know what wrapping a loan is. Do we put tape on it? Do we use...
And this is before GPT, man, where you can find out in 30 seconds, right? This is like Google and read some long articles, watch some long videos, right?
Yeah. And so it led down that path of just self-discovery, self-learning. And what it did for me, though, is it gave me a schedule. Hey, the first hour of the day, you're reading everything you can about something that's real estate related. The second 2 hours, you're going to the gym. You got to keep your mind straight. You got to keep your body, keep moving. And then after that, you're in the office and you're busting your ass until you're done. And the first couple of weeks, you're sitting there trying to find something to do. So start making my key measure sheets and start building my workbooks. But all that evolved and got better. And so then it became okay, if I'm really going to focus on this, where's my risk? Because in the railroad, you're very you try to mitigate as much risk as possible. So I looked at those first 21 deals and said, where's my risk on this if I were to build something lasting, right? So we were self-closing. We don't self-close. We stopped self-closing after that first letter because
amen to that. Yeah.
Building a house of cards. Well, by doing that, it opened me up to a professional in each area that can do mortgages or deeds of trust. And knowing what's the proper paperwork. Do you know all 50 states what their redemption period is on a foreclosure? I don't, but that person knows their state because they're a professional at it, and they can write that note because they have an attorney that signs off on it. So now when you do owner financing, I understand that I have compliant paperwork for every state. So, so you start going down these things, and, the first check, it's the second check. And so it starts to umbrella and spread out, and you start to spider web out with the right things. How do I verify access? Well, for me, I said, hey, I'm going to do within 3 hours of my house, because I'm going to drive to that property and make sure I can personally drive on it. And so by realizing that, because we live in a major metro area that we would typically shop within 3 hours of, I started developing what we called the bass boat property. And that was, we were going to buy for,
this is the good stuff. Don't just glaze over this. We're going to talk about this, because I got a personal story to share about the bass boat property. Go ahead though.
Okay. So this is where it comes from. I'm like, okay, well, how much is a bass boat? They're like $40,000 to $50,000, $60,000. So a person can afford this. They're going to go to the work, and they're going to talk to their friend about being at the ranch or their farm, because we all have this grandioso ideas of what we do personally. Like we're the main character in our story. So what does that payment look like? What can people afford? Who is that avatar that's going to buy that from me? And what is that location? And so it just kind of stumbled into it. And then I started making the comments out loud, and I was like, man, I bet there's these markets all over the country that are within 2 to 3 hours of a major metro area, that the guys like to buy side by sides. They love bass boats. They love campers. They love hunting. They love fishing. And they all want to go back to work and say, hey, man, I was out at my cabin this weekend, or I was out on my ranch this weekend. And their ranch is a 10-acre tract that they own, but it only costs them $400 or $500 a month, or they paid cash for it for $40,000 or $50,000. So, that's what started it. And then, so I just replicated that around, and we started working with that and started.
Well, let me interject you. Let me jump in and tell a quick story. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was with you, and at the time, I'll share with people like that. We've got some really respectable, some OGs, some pioneers who introduced land flipping and shared the opportunity. But most of them were very similar business models, and it was very smaller deals. Mm-hmm. And God bless them. Thank them for making us aware of this asset class as an opportunity. But, once we get into it, kind of how it was being framed at the time, Justin and I have a pretty similar. I became aware of this in 2013, started in 2014. And at the time, we were really kind of like, it was framed as the opportunity exists below like 25K-ish value, because there's not enough commission in it for realtors or agents. Mm-hmm. So these people really own liabilities. Their land is a liability, not an asset. And that's why they will sell it to you versus just list with a realtor. Well, what Justin and I both individually on our own found that wasn't in any course was that there was this blue ocean of opportunity way above that. And honestly, that's where everybody else was playing, was this little sandbox, because that's what all the courses were teaching. So I share that because, I have this client, a one-on-one coaching client, who reaches out to me and he's like, hey, I want to do some coaching with you. I've kind of been following it and been through Justin Sliva's program. He's like, I just want to know what your thoughts are. Like, do you teach like the bass boat properties? And I'm like, I think that's like not like an industry term. I think that's like a Justin Sliva term.
The coin term.
Educate me on what a bass. I know what a bass boat is. I grew up in Montana. I grew up fishing. My dad was a sawyer, a logger, right? Like worked the railroads as well. So like, you know what I mean? I grew up in the mountains. I know fishing. I know bass. I know boats. I don't know what a bass boat property is related to land. And he's like, well, it's kind of like at this price point. And I'm like, okay, that's what over here we call the boss method, right? Like we're doing boss deals, bigger deals, right? We're offering more, doing bigger deals. We're stop self-funding. We stop self-closing. That's like my boss method, right? Yeah. And so I go, wow, these are like totally in alignment. But I'm like, I love that you coined that term, like the bass boat. Because at the time I had a property where we wanted to put a pool in our personal residence. Okay. And here's how, the conversation kind of goes, was like, hey babe, like a pool's about like 60 grand, probably 80 if we do the grotto and we do all the slide and all the fun stuff we want to do, right? And so like my wife and I are talking, and I'm like, well, okay, we don't just go buy the pool. We don't cut a check. Like this isn't a straight line. It's a two-step process. Like let's go buy a property for a half price or 40%. Let's sell it on payments, right? At an inflated interest, or not inflated, like we know banks charge 10 to 14, but let's sell it on an interest rate that's 10 plus, and let's get that payment. And then let's turn and go to a pool company and say, what's the best rate you'll give us? And we'll put in a pool. So you can have your bass boat. I call it my pool property, right? Yeah. This is what we did when we put in a pool at our personal residence. I bought this property for 22 grand. I subdivided it, and then I sold it off 2 separate parcels and collected 2 $500 payments. And then with those payments, I said, okay, now we can go finance the pool at a lower interest rate than we're collecting. And that paid for our pool. So I'm like, I don't know if the pool property will catch on like bass boat property, but man, just want to say to you, I love that because that's your thing. You coined that, right? And it's kind of spread throughout the industry to the point where I heard it when somebody came into my camp, right? So I got a good laugh out of it and I love it. But the point is that you started doing bigger deals, right? You started doing bigger deals. You woke up that like maybe the courses or education I came up in taught me about self-funding and brought me awareness to this asset class, but like, I don't want to do this myself. And the other thing is like my template I got in a course isn't compliant in all 50 states, right? Really need to work with an attorney and get some solid paperwork that's legal there. So you kind of have these epiphanies. You're a quick learner. You learn that. You start doing bigger deals, right? You start doing deals that move the needle when you cash the checks, right? And how many deals? What'd you say you had done 21 or something when you kind of audited this?
That was the first mailer in 2017. The next one we did, we sent out 700 or 800 pieces of mail in LaFleur County, Oklahoma. At that time, that one mailer yielded us about $200,000 in profit. We bought 5 properties there, and one of those was 100. And I remember it because you always told you're going to get stuff back in the mail. You're never going to talk to the people, and you're going to get this thing, and you're going to make all this money, right? That's what at that time that was touted in the industry. It's not quite the same now. You've got to work in some curative stuff. But what happened was I sent a letter out, and it went to a guy in California, and he wrote me a nice letter back. Well, I never got it. So then he apparently photocopied the letter before he sent it, so he knew what he said to me. Resent me the photocopy of it and goes, hey, I'm trying to get in touch with you. You said you'd give us $44,000 for this 100 acres, 135 acres. We're interested in selling it to you, but my grandfather left it to my dad. My dad left it to his 3 boys, and then one of the boys has passed, and so he has a wife. But I want to make sure she gets 1/3 of his estate, and I want to make sure somebody can take care of us. You said you can take care of properties with death on deeds and blah, blah, blah. And again, this is the first time I've had to do curative work. And so
you're like hair on the deal. Like usually I just pass on those, right?
Well, no, at that time I wouldn't have passed on it because I didn't know to pass on it because it was like this was mailer number 2, right? And so I said okay. So I call the guy and he goes, yeah, man. I said, well, let's put it under contract. I'll send it to title. Tell us what they think. Did you have the probates and all that? He goes, well, there's not really any probates. I've got all the wills. I did, and he goes, well, hold on. I did probate from my grandpa to my dad back in 2011. But I just, that's kind of what I had. And I said, okay, no problem. We can figure that out. So I called them and they hooked me up with an attorney in Oklahoma. And he goes, yeah, we'll just do a quiet title suit and I'll do an ancillary probate. It's not a problem. There's in-state laws. And he's walking me through it. And so for 25,
and you're noting down and Googling later, right?
Yeah, 100%. Making notes, Googling later. Again, so like every morning from 5 to 6, I'm learning what is in-state law? Where can I do affidavit of heirships? Where can I do this? And so this guy is giving me a ton of information to start searching into what later has developed a couple $1 million in profit for me because I can speak and I can understand the chain of title and how I can curatively fix it for that later on. And so, there's a big push right now across the niche of distressed properties. And I've said for years, if you can figure out death on deeds, it's $1 million add-on to your business. Understanding the affidavit of heirships, understanding the wills, the in-state, how it succeeds, the succession of that. And so we go through it. It takes like 65 days, costs me $2,700 in total in curative work. And I buy this property and I got 135 acres for $49,000. And I don't know how I'm going to fund it. I've got like 28 or 30. Well, the railroad called and I had a pension with them. They said, hey, man, we'll give you 100% of your pension right now. You just pay the taxes on his income. We just need to get it off the books. Are you okay with taking it? And I said, how much is it? They go, $78,000. I said, you're exactly right. I'll take that $78,000 and I'll pay the taxes on it.
I'll tell you, a lot of people, though, won't or wouldn't because
they wouldn't have done that.
And it's not conventional. It's contrarian. Like I have conversations every week with people that are still in the W-2 mindset who anything that smells or feels unconventional. Like I'm like with you, when I found that like, when I validated this and it worked, I cashed in all my chips. I mean, we're talking everything, pension, 401k, and I pushed it all in because I knew I was sitting on a winning lottery ticket, man. But I'll tell you that takes some nerve. Not everybody will do that. They'll go, well, smart money says like, we don't want to pay these taxes. If we leave it in 30 years, it'll be this. But you drew it. You said, yeah, heck yeah, let's cash out the chips and push it into land.
I think the easiest part is that I knew I had for that after taxes and everything, I think I cleared $57,000. I had this property bought for 49, and I knew that it was conservatively worth 150, 160.
Yeah.
And that was conservative. I thought maybe 225. So I listed it for 225. A lot of first happened on this property for me. I go to the property. The neighbor had been paying the taxes on it for 3 generations as well, that they had been their family, because they owned a section right next to it. He pulls a gun on me as I go up to knock on his door. And I was like, whoa. My gun's in the car. Can I at least go get it and make it a fair fight? Because he didn't know I saw him put it in his back pocket. Yeah. And he goes, wait, what? And I said, yeah, man, if you got a gun, I think I need a gun, and we can shoot it out so we both have a fair fight.
Yeah.
But
we can step back to back and walk how many steps forward and walk and style, turn around.
We can do this out
right now.
In Texas. We can gunfight here, and this is in Oklahoma. And he kind of laughs. He goes, well, what the hell do you want? He goes, I'm not used to just strange guys walking up on my door. And I said, yes, sir, I understand. I'm with the family next door. Their property, the 3 brothers, one of them passed away. They were thinking about putting the property on the market. I'm here to look at it. I've already bought it, right? I own it. He doesn't know that. And they've been paying the taxes on it, and he's not responded to any of my letters. And so I'm like, and he goes, oh, yeah. And I said, I just wanted you, if you saw my truck, open the gate, you know who it was, and you didn't freak out or anything. So this old man, he had ran a poly pipe over a half a mile that he was stealing propane off the natural gas pump over there to heat his house and his electricity. And so that was going on with it. Pulls the gun. He says, well, my family has first right of refusal to buy that property. I said, awesome, man. That's great. If you have it, I would love to entertain the offer from you. They're going to list it for $275. So that's going to be the list. Any first offer that comes in, I'll give you first right of refusal. He's like, well, let me call my daughter, see if she's interested, and I'll call my son and see what they say. I said, okay. I said, well, here's my number. They can call me. So I go take video, take the drone, look at the property, look at it's great property, call my wife and said, babe, we should move up here. We could sell the 40, pay off the land. We'll have 95 acres in a small town, sell our house.
This is much earlier. You should do that now, Justin. But back then, that was like, now you should really do that. But back then, that was forward thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. And she's like, I'm not moving to a town with a Piggly Wiggly, is what she told me. And I said, okay. I said, the target's 30.
Is there a Nordstrom? That's what my, is there a Nordstrom here? Is there, right? A Target. If there's not, I'm not moving there.
Yeah. So the guy, his son calls me and he goes, hey, man, I really want that property. And I said, hey, man, I really want y'all to have it too. It's contiguous to y'all's family place. I think it'd add to it. Yeah. He goes, what's the best you can do on it? And my dad told me they were going to list at 225. I said, don't tell the family I told you this, but for you, it's 145, but I get lifetime rights to hunt on the property. And he goes, 145 and you get lifetime rights to hunt on the property. I said, that's all I asked him. He says, all right, I can do that. So stroke the check. We made right under $100,000 because there's no commissions, no real little closing costs. He paid all closing costs. And so, it was right at $95,000, $100,000 in profit right then off that one deal. And then we sold a few more in that county. And that county, again, it was a first for me because I went up and met somebody on a 40-acre deal and they handed me a stack of 20s in a Walmart plastic bag at the courthouse. So I would notarize and sign and record right there with them there. And so
I tell you, that's what I say. There should be a podcast or I should do a series called like Adventures in Land Investing. Because man, the stories we could all tell of the things that happen. So that's a big milestone, and it front loads kind of things for you, I assume. Like what I obviously loaded when we get it, like I was with you, I was like, I had a truck, I had platinum insurance. If loaded salary is huge, what is like net salary? How does that relate to where you just get $100,000 check for land? What were you at with the railroad company?
I was making $150 a year there, and my bonus was anywhere from $50 to $100 at that time. The bigger railroad when I was there, my salary was a little less. It was $120, but I would get $150,000 a year in stock options or a little bit of cash.
So you're trying to replace that, but also like we know, like private insurance, right? Yeah. There's all these other things that like salary for salary. It's not apples to apples. And I was so ignorant when I quit, man. I was like, replace the salary. Let's go. I'm out. I quit, guys. And then I shot private insurance. And at the time, man, I'll be honest, I thought it was like just a political thing when they were talking about all this Obamacare and private insurance. And I just didn't get it because I'd always had this W-2 where like I cut 20%. I paid for 20% when I was an hourly employee. And then when I became management, it was just free. And I got all platinum insurance for free. I had no idea what everybody was kind of talking about. I just thought it was this partisan like argument. And then I get in the private sector, right, and go shop my own insurance, and it was like $3,000 a month to start. And I was like, holy smokes, because I had a young family at the time. And then I realized, like, when we talk about leaving our jobs, we always like think like, hey, I need to build a side hustle that replaces X, but really it's not X, it's Y, which is the loaded salary, right? Like all the other things you get. Like I was with you, I had a brand new company truck. I had all these things, right? That if we add them up together, now I got to go have a car payment. I got to go have all these things that you might not consider, right? When you go full time. Where I tell people now, like, be patient, have more overlap than you think you need. It's not like do a big deal and just quit the job. Yeah. Right. But $100K on the front end changes a lot. It probably for you, like, makes you realize there's bigger deals out there. And two, obviously gives you some breathing room, right?
Yeah. No, it's exactly right. So what I always told everybody, 2 points. The insurance thing was a huge thing for me. I tried to negotiate that in my severance, and they told me they wouldn't do it. And so I was freaking out about insurance, 2 small kids, wife. And so when I left, that was 2000, it was April 2017. It was one of my morning Googles of, best insurance for entrepreneurs. And I found MediShare. And so we went into MediShare, and it allowed you to circumvent the Obama laws at that time because it was a religious thing that I had to, you have to, when you call them and you buy it, you have to tell them you're Christian. You have to, they only cover what happens in a Christian way. So if I were to cheat on my wife and get an STD, that would not be Christian. They would not cover that. If I were drunk driving and I got in a car wreck, they would not cover that because that was not the Christian way of life. And so that was the way I got around it. And it cost me $400 a month because I was like you. I was seeing $2,800.
This is almost like a forcing mechanism, right? Where it creates, it encourages you or incentivizes you to behave in the correct
way.
It's not just a cheaper rate. It's like, all right, this is a forcing mechanism.
Yeah. Yeah. And so so we did that, and I got the insurance thing cleared up because that was my biggest thing is like, okay, well, how do I cover my salary plus another $3,000 a month? And so we did the MediShare. So that got through that. But like you said early on, that breathing room, what I always told myself is at the time I needed $5,000 to live. That was my nut. I needed that to live. That gave me groceries, that gave electric, that gave house payment, that gave car payments, insurance. That did not change our life at all. Because like I said, I did well, but I always was pretty conservative with our money. So what I would do is every month, my month was $5,000. Every month I went back to zero. Anything over that would go into an account, and I would get to 6 months breathing room. So I always had 6 months salary. Then it was 2 years. And it's worked up to that. So now my savings account sits at about 2 years worth of breathing room. I keep about 3 months worth of bills in the checking, and I float back and forth as I need it. Everything else goes to work. Everything is always working at all times. Now, whether that's in deals or notes or funding for other people, I keep all that other money working and just let it churn for as long as I can. When my savings account gets down to where, hey, you got about a year to 8 months left in there, I fill it back up. And I pull some money from the table and put it back. So I built it in that way. Now, is that the most efficient way to spend all of our money? Probably not, because I know I can go back to work and make more money. Or I can go, when I say go back to work now, I mean, I can send more mail. I can find more deals. I can cash in this or that. So I can make that happen pretty quick. But for me, my security and what my comfort level was is know that I have enough runway. I know I can't mess up something for a year straight in this business. And so if I have a year set there, I'm always good. I don't have to worry about the stresses of, if we have a broken arm, MediShare covers it. I pay $5,000 out of pocket. I've got $5,000, put it just goes back in, and I just pull up $5,000 from the business if I need it. And then if I don't need it, I just let it keep working as long as I can. And then I move what I need over. And so
that's so interesting, because that's when I kind of started to recognize. I think I read, it was years and years ago, man. It was right when it came out. I was already following this guy, Mike Michalowicz, who wrote a book called The Pumpkin Plan, which is kind of like the 80-20 principle, right? But more for like customers and business, right? And then he went on to write a book called Profit First, right? Which I read it right when it came out. It's went on to be a huge thing. But essentially he said, hey, create several accounts. We need buckets, right? Because he would say, I was doing at the time was like my one account was like a cash salad, right? Where this was my operations, this was my acquisitions, this was owner pay, this was marketing. It was all in one account. And the way I operated it was, hey, as long as more is coming in than is going out, because that was my financial literacy, dude. That's what I came up with. That's what I knew. I got good at acquisitions, but I didn't know how to manage my money. Yeah. So I read this book, Profit First by Mike Michalowicz, and I go into the bank and I go, I need 7 accounts. And they're like, you're crazy. What?
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, I need 7 accounts. And I show him the book. Right. And I'm like, this is what I need to do. And to separate things. And for me, Justin, that changed everything, where with each deal, I go, okay, at the time we're savvier now, but at the time, like 25% went into taxes so that I wasn't panicking at the end of the year. You know, 10% went into like owner pay, you know, so much went into marketing, so much went into property acquisitions, and kind of just getting that organization, you know, like you're saying, of running it like a business and knowing where you're at. But mainly what people, the word a lot of people don't know, if you're in Silicon Valley all day long, you know what Runway means. But like if you're a W-2 guy, listening to podcasts, you run a side hustle, and then all of a sudden you want to quit. A lot of people don't know what Runway means. Well, Runway means a much more comfortable conversation with your wife about quitting your job. Runway means like you're buying yourself time. Like if you have a couple dud months or quarters, like you have enough breathing room, right, to regroup. And I think Runway is super important, right? It's like peace of mind, and it gives you time to do what you know you can do, but without like that meter of like, we got to get an acquisition month 1, month 2. Right. So I'm with you now when I counsel people. I'm more conservative with my like coaching and counseling than I am with myself. Right. Because I'm the double down. My wife's super, you know, like risk averse. Right. And she's what keeps this whole thing like afloat. But I'm the double down. You win. And I go double down. Right. I just keep doubling down. You know what I mean? So we balance that. But when I coach people, it's more like, hey, let's be methodical. Let's build something sustainable. Walk me through, because I don't know timeline here. It feels like you go from kind of becoming a powerhouse investor. People are hearing your name. You're on podcasts. You go from just investing and building like a legit sustainable business model, replacing your income. You go from that to, is it funding? Does funding precede education? I feel like that's how, from afar, that's what I saw, I thought.
Yeah. So funding well preceded education. Education for us, education is kind of a byproduct of the funding. And I'll explain that, because a lot of people in the world of guru and internet, everybody can get a microphone. You have a lot of people that jump into coaching, and they have a good month or a good year, and they want instant credibility, and they want to coach you and sell you a course, and you kind of fall into their funnel. And so you got to ask yourself, as a person, if you think, like, again, my mind works a little bit different than most people, is I understand that I'm always in somebody's funnel for something, whether that's, you know, the toothpaste company or the electric company or the car brand or whatever. We're always in somebody's funnel. And so when you start to niche it down to like, hey, I want to do a side hustle and things like that, you work into their funnel. Well, when that Oklahoma, that mailer I talked about, that was 2017 still. So we're in year 1. I get a deal back, and this lady in Hot Springs reaches out. She said, hey, my dad was a forester. I have 1,896 acres. I'd be interested in you buying it. And they're all over. They have random access. And I'm going through this. She goes, I want $1 million for it. And at the time, I'm like, oh, man, this is like what you dream of. And this is like, you know, I'm 5 months into my own business, working for myself. And, you know, we always have that deal that's just out of reach, right? Like, we're like, God, man, I just need that money. And so I'm at the gym, and I'm talking to this guy because I'm helping him with his roofing. I'm using direct mail and sending it to roofers for him. I'm trying anything I can to hustle.
Yeah, once you know marketing and targeting, pulling lists, targeting demographics, this applies to any industry, honestly.
100%. And so, like, and again, this is 4 months into full time for myself. I reach out. I said, man, I got this big deal. He's like, oh, I know a guy that loves money. Let me see. So another guy calls me. It was his boss, calls me, goes, yeah, I got this attorney. He does private money sometimes. I can get you an interview. You need to call him at this time, or text him at this time and call him at this time, and y'all set up appointments. So, and people have heard this story. If you were at one of our live events, David spoke at the last ballpark one, I believe, and we became really good friends from this. But it shows how it kind of all snowballed really quickly. I get set up. I walk in shorts, button-up shirt, sleeves rolled up, boat shoes. He goes, did you really walk into a meeting for $1 million wearing shorts? And I look him square in the face, and I'll miss a beat, and I say, yeah, I own my company, and you didn't send you had your secretary call with an invitation. She didn't say there was a formal dress code. So next time you expect me to be in slacks or a suit, I'd expect that to be on the invitation if you're going to have your secretary call and confirm with me. Otherwise, I own my business and I make those decisions. My shorts do not change the deal. And he looks, he kind of smirks. He goes, I like the shit out of you already. And so this is 2018.
Hey, Zuckerberg walks into multi-billion-dollar meetings in flip-flops, right?
Yep. Yeah. And so he ultimately said no. Him and his dad own a home office. He's a couple years older than me. His dad comes in and goes, well, I want to do business with him. Why aren't we giving him the money? He's like, Dad, we don't know the guy. We don't know Oklahoma. It's not our thing. He's like, I don't know. I feel like there's something we could do there. And the guy goes, there's got to be something we can do with this guy. I want to do something with him. I like him. And the guy was like, the attorney is like, yeah, I do too. But he's like, how did you find this property? And I said, I use direct mail. And he goes like, what, you sent postcards or something? And he goes, we've done postcards. It doesn't work. And I said, no, I use a 2-page letter. I have an agreement in there. I send this letter. It says, hey, I want to buy your land. Here's the price. And I give him a price up front. He goes, think it'd work for houses? And I said, yeah, I changed the APN number from a piece of land to a house. And I just got to have a pricing methodology. What would you pay? He goes, I'm going to draw a polygon on Google Earth. And I want you to mail everybody in that house. I'll pay for it. And then me and you, we go look at every house that you get back, and I'll pay you a set amount for each one of those houses. Okay? And I said, okay. So then I learned about wholesaling right there. No, I just said, yes, I can do it. Knew nothing about house wholesaling.
Yeah. Commit first, figure it out later.
Yeah. So I draw up the letter. I look at pricing, and I figure out a pricing methodology that worked with me with what I was seeing with depreciation. So basically, I was trying to buy any house that had 7 years of equity into it for basically what they paid for 7 years previously. That was a price he was good with. That was a price, and he was going to give me $2,500 per house we bought. So I send out in this 2-mile square polygon in this neighborhood and bought 9 houses for him. And he goes, holy. And I'm thinking, right?
It's whatever, dude, right? Like all day long. And then really it's your first time too.
I got to make $5,000 a month to get my nut. And so this is 2018. And a reason I tell this story is because it opens up a relationship with somebody that they have a home office that's real estate based. And so he goes, wow, that was amazing. He goes, you think you could do multifamily? And I said, yeah, I can do anything.
It's a different checkbox, a different drop down in my data source. Heck yeah.
Right. And I do it. So I mail that, and I get 4 quadplexes, 2 duplexes. I get a whole block of duplexes from another lady back. And then I get an 8-unit apartment complex. And this is where it's pivotal to get to the funding. And so, I know this, I want you to understand how this stuff was working at this time. And because this is still year 1-ish, 2.
Because it wasn't, he just walked in with a bag full of money. Yeah, you had to validate and prove yourself.
I validated my worth to him, and I'm validating my worth to myself at the same time. And I think that's the most important thing, is gaining the confidence as an entrepreneur that you can believe in yourself and you can do hard things that are outside the norm of what you were taught by. Somebody here taught you how to buy this cheap dirt somewhere. You can do different things. You can take what Travis teaches you, what I teach you, and expand on it and change it and make it your own. So it's important to understand that, because this is how we keep moving, and this is how you kind of evolve the businesses. And so I have another business at the time. It was a supplement company called Key Sports Nutrition. My partner, that was the person I worked with, his wife passed away. He was my partner in that business. We started it when I worked there with him. He got into a business and I helped him clean it up because of my Amazon background. And so we were at a point of breaking even, or just making a little bit of money on it. And we had gotten in a lawsuit for trademark infringement, or IP. We had won the lawsuit, so the company offered to buy us out. So we had a little bit of cash from that. The guy did not want the 8-unit apartment complex that came back. So I look at my buddy that has a W-2 and I say, hey, he says I should buy it. It's not his class of apartments. Would you be interested in putting your W-2 and signing on the note with me? We'll be 50-50 partners. We'll use this money to put the money down. And I'm going to clean up the contracts, clean it up, get the rent stabilized, and I'm going to sell it. And that's what we're going to do. Should have kept it to this day, because I sold it to another guy for $125,000 more than we paid for it. And he paid all closing costs. So we netted $125,000 off of it. And that guy still owns it today, and he loves it, and he thanks me every day for it. And that was 2018. And I see him at the gym quite often. And every time I see him, he hugs me and tells me thank you for the best deal of his life. So it was, the reason I say that is, that relationship pushed me to learn something different, which got me into the apartment complex. We flipped the apartment complex, and he goes, what are we going to do now with this profit that we have? We had the little bit of profit from the supplement company, profit from the apartment. I said, I'm going to start funding other people's deals, because there is nobody right now that's openly saying I'll fund deals for them. And this was 2018.
And there wasn't. There was not. That's what I say. When we started ours, it was just after yours, and I want to say, I think we were, from what I could see, we were the 4th funding company out there, with yours being set up shop ahead of us. Right. Where at the time, based on my research, because I was trying to find money, man. And as soon as I would say, and that's what my wife said, like, as soon as I'd meet with all these hard money lenders, private lenders, and I would give them our transactional history, our profit, the whole, hey, never lost money, done this many deals. And they're like excited. And then I'd say land. And then she's like, you realize land is a 4-letter word. Right? Yeah. And that's kind of how people were treating me. There's like this stigma So I had to crack the nut myself as an investor to get outside money. And then later we used it, leveraged it to do enough deals, make enough money, build our own war chest. And then we launched our own funding company. But you're right. At that time, it's not like today where I could give you a list of 40 funders. Now, whether they show up on day of closing with the money or got to get 3 wires or, to get there. But I'm just saying the industry's matured. So when you started, absolutely. You were one of the very first funding companies available for land flippers, right?
Yeah. And so there was another guy that would do it, but you had to know him, and he would give you $250,000 line of credit. He was based in Austin and China. He bounced between the two. And I knew a couple guys that used him. I've met with him once, super nice guy. I just we never found common ground because I had his model that he was doing with his guys, but we provided the funding for it. And then the coaching piece came 2-part. There was a guy reached out about funding or questions about a piece of property. He heard me on Finance Friday with Land Academy at the time because they wanted to add funding to their mix and they never had it. And so I was like, guys, this is what we're doing. We're launching this. And they said, great. Can you come on every Friday and talk about your deals? That way we have credibility with deals are getting done. Somebody went through our training. Now we're the only education piece that has funding with it. And so we did that.
I felt like at the time, because I was a listener at the time, a student at the time, and an investor, like what I would call some of my students now, like quiet assassins, right? Where nobody maybe knew of me, but I was killing it in the background and taking in all this education. I remember following that. And I felt like at the time that was a good platform for you, right? That gave you a microphone kind of at that time. And it was not a competitive product with them at the time. So there was no issue, right? So you go on doing Finance Fridays on the Land Academy podcast, which at that time was one of the very few educators, I would say, with like actual, like, I don't know, listeners, and not just listeners, but alumni that were actually doing deals and doing well, right? So you start talking about financing and funding with people.
So we turned that into, and so we started with that. Well, the education piece comes, a guy calls and says, hey man, I've got this property. I just don't know if I can close it. I don't know what to do about the legal description. It's not right. And I said, well, I can write a legal description, learning your what corner, what section of this. Well, it was 15 acres, so it's kind of wonky. And I said, I will write the legal description for you, but just give me the deal. I'll just pay an assignment fee and I'll take it and I'll fix it. And he goes, well, why don't you put your money where your mouth is and fund it? And I said, okay, I'll put up the money. We'll help you fix it. And then so I saw there was another thing that happened. There's an education piece where people are willing to put their money where their mouth was, and the education. So, when you fund deals, you spend a lot of time underwriting it, going through like people, you're like, man, you should know this. It needs to have access. You need to be able to do this, or that shouldn't be off flood zone. It shouldn't be a side of a mountain. And so the education piece came as a precursor to getting you in the funnel. Remember, I said everybody's in a funnel at all times. The funnel for me is I want to do your deal with you, but I want you to have a little bit more knowledge than just, hey, I got this deal for $100 and I don't know what it is. I want you to be able to say, hey, it's got access, it's got usable topography, it's worth 2 to 3 times what I'm paying for it. That you can understand it's not an undivided interest because you didn't even look at the legal description. Things of that nature. So the education piece came to put somebody more educated into my funnel to bring me a deal to fund it. Because at the time, we were the first that was openly saying, I don't care who your uncle, I'm not your uncle. I don't care who your uncle is. I don't care who you are. It's always bear to the deal and we'll protect each other.
I don't care that dogma. Like, I don't care what guru or educational camp you're in, right? Like there's kind of basically like we're non-denominational, right? Like we're agnostic to like what educational camp you're in. If the fund, if we can underwrite it and it makes sense, we'll fund your deal. Right.
So that kind of led to the funding piece. And so Finance Friday, like you said, it kind of put the microphone in my mouth. We had a pretty good listening base coming from that. And we started getting a lot of traction through that. And we decided in 2019 to start the podcast. That was me and Adam with Casual Fridays.
This is your partner, and I still got to connect with him. We should have him on, man. Adam Southey.
He's super introverted.
Casual Fridays co-host who actually started doing land maybe a couple months before you, it sounded like, and told you about it, right?
Yeah. So he's kind of an introvert. So he kind of hides. He's like, just kind of does what he does. But we've known each other since high school. We've known each other a long time. And so we started the podcast and, we go through that. We didn't launch the course. We were doing consulting. Like I was fixing so many problems coming in with people that would run into just like little issues or wanting to figure out how to tweak the business. Like I said, the
Like
education
as
piece.
needed
Yeah,
consulting,
as
right?
needed. Yeah, if you want to come and talk about you've got a couple problems in your business and you just can't see it, or you want a fresh eye, or you have this deal you're wanting to see if it's actually worthwhile or not, and just getting something. Like I tell them, I said you can still do the deal. I'm just going to give you my. I'm going to treat it like
Dude,
you
you
were
were
my
doing
deal.
that for free when you fund the deal. You'd get the deal and go, wait a minute, there's a problem with wetlands. There's a
Yep.
problem with taxes. Let me
Yeah.
educate you. So it makes a lot of sense to do consulting on the front end, especially if they want to work with you, because we're qualifying the property. And the other thing is I'm teaching you how to, to qualify and disqualify properties, right? Prior to bringing them with a funder. So you start consulting and you're funding.
Yeah. So that all kind of goes together. The podcast happens. We launch our course probably, I think it was 9 months after we started the podcast. It sells quite a few right off the bat. And then so that was end of like say September of 19, and 2020, we decided to do the first live event. Somebody said, hey, you want to do a live event with us? Will you host it? And I'm like, heck yeah, we'll host it. And, I've done all these kind of events before when I worked at the railroad. And so we do Top Golf.
As an attendee though, right?
No, I used to teach. Yeah. So, and part of one of my roles at Union Pacific was I taught a safety course that was the high risk employees. And so for an entire region. And so they would come in and I was certified in that. And you do a 2-day course on that. So you got people that are high risk, they're unmotivated to be there. And you had to kind of motivate them into be a little bit more safer.
And you'd kind of been in a training role. That's interesting. Same with me. What so much was transferable carried over. I had been training people, new hires and people for years. So it felt natural to have that patience. And like you said, you got to motivate them. So they didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. So that kind of rolled into it.
Do a live event. Right. And where's this at? And what year is this?
This is 2000, beginning of 2020, like January of 2000 or 19 or no, it's 2020. And so we do the live event. The people that hosted it had done one before and they only had like 4 or 5 people show up. So we said, hey, we're going to plan for 35. We sell out the 35 tickets and we're like, wow, okay. So the next year we say, I think we can do 50. We do 50 or then we go to 100 and then we sell out 100. Then we sell out 125. So we go Top Golf. Then we do Texas Ranger Stadium. We sell out Texas Ranger Stadium for as many people as they can fit in a room. We do that for a couple years. And then this year we're doing Mexico. We go in a couple weeks to Mexico with a group. We've got 28 going. We told ourselves if we could get
15, big group for out of country. I mean, I
imagine the logistics on that.
Pulling together 100 plus stateside, but that's a commitment, right?
Yeah. So the logistics on that is kicking my ass right now. But and so I say that because the podcast was just a way as another part of that funnel is like, hey, we'll tell you about our journey and you can pull this education. We've taught, different courses, but we don't push our courses. We don't push our one-on-one coaching very much. And as of last year, I kind of stepped back because we went real heavy for 2 years with some really big groups of group coaching with our masterclass. And those guys have done amazing. We had 21 people go through that. But when I give my all when I commit to something, I want to give my all to it. And then I was noticing while I was getting fulfillment by watching their successes, it was draining my social battery because of the commitment we gave to them with the amount of time we were working with them. And so I kind of stepped back from some of the coaching and consulting. I do one-on-one consulting now if somebody needs some help on something. But if I get asked, like, hey, can I do training with you one-on-one? What does that look like for the next year? And I'm like, if you want me to give you a price, you can't afford it because it's not in my best interest right now. Now, if you want to schedule,
I price anchored it to where it's so darn much.
But if you want to go have 2 or 3 calls with me to help you get your mind wrapped around something, feel free to schedule it. And so this past year and a half, we've built the fund. I mean, that's kind of what I was speaking on there.
Because this is the evolution kind of like of it along the way. Like you say, if you're any sort of entrepreneur, and I always use that loosely because I think guys like maybe an Elon Musk or a Bill Gates or a Richard Branson would laugh when I call ourselves entrepreneurs. But at the same time, like I think the guys that are still trapped in W-2s very much would view us as entrepreneurs, right? Because
I would agree with that too. When you go out and hunt when you go hunt for your own food and it's not given to you at the job, then that's one of the things. The guy that
you start to recognize opportunity is what I was going to say, and along the way, not just and actually focus becomes the challenge of right because you recognize adjacent opportunity, like you, whether it's consulting, funding deals, like or going like bigger, because we're teaching active operators. A lot of times, you and I teach people how to start an active land flipping business, which is very active, not passive. But then, as we know, like as people start to hear our name, right? you start to receive like, inquiries from passive investors who just want to kind of throw money at you and get a return. So that's my segue. That's teeing you up pretty high, dude. And so you recognize opportunity, and tell us about the fund.
So we started Pasture Holdings back in, so it's been over a year and a half, almost 2 years now. And we started myself, Trevor Probant, who has the podcast Dirt Road to Wealth, Josh Biesinger. You'll see his name float around a bunch of the groups. He's started a hard money product that he has out there for people. We launched a hard money product as well. And that was it's about a year and a half ago. I said, hey, there's 4 things that need to happen in the niche. And these are the 4 things. Hard money was being one of them. And we've seen 3 operators right now that offer hard money. Eric Schraga, myself, and Josh all offer hard money in some aspects. And, it's capital. You always, as a business owner, you're always looking for cheaper capital, faster capital, and make sure it's there. So you got the guys that'll JV with you for 50-50. And then you got guys, and they're racing to zero, that 60-40 split, 70-30 split, time periods. But we started the hard money piece because we can arbitrage it off of different investor money or different lines of credit that we can make a percentage off, and it's protected with an asset. So the fund, when we started it, the idea was we're going to do these value adds that we've been doing with subdivides and these bigger projects, and we're going to use investor money, maybe some bank leverage. What we found in this market, though, it's kind of taken us back a little bit, was the interest rates with banks, because it shot up so high with the Fed and the cost of capital. We started getting nervous with our personal guarantees on everything, because that was the thing, is you're bringing CapEx money and down payment and payment money. We're guaranteeing it, plus bringing a little bit of the money ourselves as a group. And so we get into these projects. We turned 2 really fast, and they did really well. The investors were super stoked. They made like 20-something%, 20 or 40% on their money in a short time. So it was like 60-something% annualized. Then we started buying a bunch of notes, because we see an opportunity right now where investors have, in the slower markets, put on owner financing to get the property to move, but they run into a situation where they don't have the capital to continue because they're wrapped up with that owner financing. So
you're note rich and cash poor. And they got to liquidate.
So we started doing what we did in 2018, started buying more packages, and we've bought about 1.4, 1.5 million in notes in the last 6 to 8 months. We're doing some transitioning and doing some pivoting. We've got some things on the horizon that we're wanting to look at, but ideally for us, and as you get it, we're not in a growth mode in a say that I need to turn $100,000 into $1 million so I can be a millionaire. I'm not that point. It's how can I set up longevity that becomes passive with it's a little bit of active work at the beginning, becomes passive long term, that we're protected with a solid asset that we know and we like, and that being land. And so we know and like land. We're comfortable carrying some debt. We're okay with arbitraging interest and spreads. And so the fund is kind of moving into more of a, how many notes can we buy to help operators out, because it helps the niche, keeps cash coming in.
Well, without question, if there's a gap in the market, and I would say there's people advertising it, but like there's a lot of posturing, like actually showing up and having the resources, the money to follow through, versus like getting on a podcast, throwing up a web form, and then you go, oh, hey, I can't do this, I'm tapped out, type of thing, right? So there's a need for credible people with actual money behind them to buy funds, because there's a lot of great operators who have built up a really respectable note portfolio, and they want to liquidate that, or liquidate some of it to infuse some cash, positive or negative situation they're going through, right? Either way, it's needed. So are you guys in the fund, are these different funds or at different offerings, where one strategy you talked about was we're buying large acreage, we're subdividing into ranchettes, we're selling those off, and then another you talked about was actually buying existing notes. Are these different offerings, or how does that work?
So we're a Reg D 506C, which means we're for accredited investors only. So I can advertise it as much as I want, but it's only
talk about it.
Yeah. So that's a good thing. We are one fund, but we have several offerings inside of it. So each one of our value or equity play deals, you'll see those pop up, and it'll be, hey, you're part of the subdivide. We underwrite it. You see what it is. You're part of that one deal. Our note fund is now an evergreen fund that you can put your money into it. There's a lockup period, and we pay 11% to our investors. We've never missed a payment. They've been getting payments since August will be 2 years that they have received their 11% paid. It's annual 11% paid monthly. And
paid
so
monthly. That's good. I wouldn't skip over that, man. I would bold font underline that, right?
Yeah, so the problem with
investor, that's great.
But the problem with land investors is our sphere has been very land investor centric, right? We know they make big profits. They know we make big profits. So when I tell them, hey, I can give you 11%, they look at it and they go, that's not enough money. Like, I need more. I know you're making
talking
more.
about 100% ROI and you want to pay me 11.
So the good thing is when we build a subdivide, we can sell the note internally to our note fund. And so our investors are cashed out on that one offering. The note fund pays out, but if they're invested across every one of our offerings, they only get 1K1 from us. It's all centralized. And so that was how we set it up from the beginning. We are working on some other things I don't want to get too far into yet because I like to surprise people with the forward thinking versus saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. And it doesn't work out. But we are looking at ways to help the non-accredited investor too. And we've got a couple ideas that we're shuffling through right now. Both will two major ones will probably come through, but it takes a little time to get them all dialed in and make sure we're compliant, because now that becomes the new thing. It's funny when you send out a letter on some 2-page agreement that doesn't really hold up anything for $100 an acre, but now you're talking SEC, you're talking fiduciary.
Yeah, you're on their radar, bro. Like you decided, like you made the deliberate decision to start like this fund and stand it up right, so that you can talk about this on any platform, right? And ask for, hey, invest in my fund, right? You've set it up so you can do that. But the other part of that decision is like, okay, maybe I was using private lending from several people or one big money guy before, flying under the radar. Now, like, I got to be compliant with everything, right? And I got to be mindful of what I can and can't do. Like you said, accredited, non-accredited, things like that, right? It's a different level of quality and sophistication, but also like the standard I assume they're going to hold you to, and the updates and the questions that are being asked. It's very similar to going from targeting $10,000 properties to $400,000. It's a different level of sophistication and an avatar, right?
Yeah, it does. And so now that's been the biggest thing for us to crack, is how do I get people that are okay with trusting land as the asset class and 11% with a new brand. And so with anything, it takes time to build your brand. You know this as well as I do, but it takes time. So when you start a brand new company, you're like, hey man, but I've been doing this for this time. Like you walked into those money guys, you showed them your transactions and everything, and they're like, that sounds good, but I don't really feel comfortable with it. Now, under this one brand, we've been able to show our previous experience. We've got a collective group of founders that have a great experience, ton of runway, ton of capital, and they have the knowledge base in different markets and areas. MBAs in statistics, MBA, masters in statistics, MBA. We got people that are doctorate in mergers and acquisitions that are founding with us. And I'm the dumbest guy in the group, but apparently I talk the most, so they let me talk to everybody.
I'm the same way. That's what my wife says. She's the MBA here, and I'm the high school educated singing, dancing monkey, right?
Who's just willing to take risks. Go, boss.
You got to be visionary, right? Like everybody's got their strengths, right?
Yeah, and so what we're having to do now with the fund is, while we have to be more compliant, there's certain things that we have to do to maintain that credibility. It also puts in that our reputation is important to us, because we are running at a professional status. We are no longer the guy in his kitchen table sending out just pieces of mail to make this work. We have an office. You can come visit us. We're trying to grow this organically, but still trying to be efficient as we can while we bootstrap it, but be as professional as we can as we grow with this. It's a different type of business now. Used to get really excited, and it's sad to say this, and I hate saying this because I don't want it to sound posturing. And I've always tried to do that, not talk numbers or anything. But when we talked about 2017, I buy those 21 properties, and you're buying properties for $125 an acre, selling them for $300 or $400 an acre. Dude, every one of those meant the world to us. That was going to pay for dance. It was going to pay for Little League. It was going to pay for T-ball. It was, it really means the world to you, and it really does. And I try to ground myself on a daily basis. Every morning I try to say what I'm grateful for, in my head, and I lay there, do my morning meditations at that point. But I was thinking about this, and I had 47,000 or 50, like right at 50 grand come in on Monday. And to me, I was kind of throwing the checks on the desk or looked at the wire, said, that came in, throw these checks and cash them. And I'm thinking to myself, and I was like, Justin, you need to be grateful for this. And you need to remain that gratefulness, because, I'm often worried about the next deal, which is going to be $1 million or $2 million. How I'm going to do it. We put $1 million under contract last week. I need to find funds for one of them. I'm going to have to go get a loan on one, and then I'm going to partner on another one. Do I run it through here? And so these bigger numbers, we become kind of immune to smaller amounts. But then I think about my wife as a school teacher. When she taught back in the day, she made $45,000 a year, and I'm just throwing it on the desk like it's nothing. And so I will say that, there's a humbleness that has to happen. There's I was telling somebody this week. I say a consultant client, but he's more of a friend, right? I've coached him through the beginning, but we get hung up in hearing a podcast saying, hey, Justin started a fund, or he did this, he did that. Travis did this, and this over the last course of years. And we don't take the time to just be thankful for what we've accomplished, and we do
Yeah.
it. So
Have you ever read the book, The Gap and the Gain?
I had
It's an
not.
incredible book that it
Okay.
kind of encourages us and talks about like that. We're always looking ahead, especially guys like you and I, we're always looking ahead. Okay. But you get the audiobook, right? And
Okay.
and the gap and the gain is like we never pause to look at those gains in the rear view,
Yeah.
and we're always putting this pressure on ourselves of like what's next and all this, but sometimes we forget that like the gains we've accomplished, everything
Yeah.
we've completed, right? You're right. Like there was a time where you go, that first deal was a big milestone.
Yeah.
That first 6-figure check was a huge event in your life. And and it's unfortunate you kind of do become desensitized. And like you said, I don't say that to brag or posture like you. It's like you said, it's a reality. And I constantly find that's part of where coaching with me. I feel like I get to share in people's firsts.
Yeah.
And I see that excitement, because if we could bottle that, right? If we could bottle that excitement, we can't get it back. You're ruined it. And for you just have to keep going bigger to feel that feeling again. But for other people, no, I completely understand. And I think it's unfortunate because it's kind of like when you have enough money, you can buy yourself anything. I notice the same thing where it's all of a sudden even gift getting, like people give you a gift. It's like, thanks. Like, I'm like, thanks. But it's like when you get to a point where like you can buy yourself anything, you're not as excited. And that, I don't know how you solve that, man. I don't know the cure for that, but I know what you're saying, right? I know what you're saying and what you're sharing. And for people though, we got to be empathetic. We got to remember where their journey is. And I always tell people like, hey, every master was once a disaster, right? And we're just in a different chapter in the same darn book, right? Like our hero's journey, we might be farther along than somebody listening. And there might even be some guy out there with loads of money, 10s, 20 million bucks, sitting around going, hey, I'm farther along than you two clowns.
100%.
Right? So we're all in different kind of chapters where we're at, but I completely understand what you're saying, where all the time I'll be doing a coaching call and we get a wire and my wife will like Slack me and she's like, hey, we just got this wire and tell me the amount. And I'm like, cool. And then it's like, I'm like, darn, that's not a good thing. Why am I desensitized to this? Why am I more excited to share in somebody else's win than my own? Because it becomes common, right? But so you're scaling up, you're going bigger with this. You've got this fund. How should people connect with you, I guess, right? And then why should they connect with you? Is it mainly
I'm gonna add
fun?
one thing to that previous thought though, before we get away from that. And so what I was telling that guy was, what I found for myself, and I spent the last 2 years working on this concept because it's been bothering me for 2 years of that growth. And you get there, you have your first $1 million year, you have your second $1 million year, you have your $3 million year. And Mark Podolsky writes a book, his Dirt Rich, and a lot of land investors come through his funnel and find his book. And he talks about the hungry ghost in there. And that kind of resonated with me, that you get to this point where nothing's ever enough. And so I kind of found to myself is I have to go look at myself and know what my creed is for me as a man. And what that is as a father, as a husband, it's just me, who I am. And I think it's important to have this conversation because I don't think as men we spend enough time on that. You're like, hey man, you really need to figure out who you are, and that's your creed that you live by. And you notice the guys that are super successful, they seem to have that. Like you're not pulling them off kilter. Like this is who I am. This is what I believe in. These are my core things. Now you'll hear the rebuttals. Well, I'm a Christian. I live by the Bible. And no. That's separate. That's a belief. I'm talking about you as an individual. What will you go to war for? What will you look in your mirror and say, hey, the world melted down around me, but I did not alienate myself. I don't waver from this because this is me. And so I would challenge those people to find what that is. And so for me, that's what I've had to find. And I found that I've been able to be more grateful for those things. And, you still have moments of clarity, but being able to notice that, hey, this moment of clarity, I need to be grateful for this. I need to think about it is stepping in the right direction. And so I say that because I want to have those conversations more with the people around us. Is you become that person who, whether it is like on a deal, if it doesn't have this, this, and this, you don't buy it. You just say no and you move on. And that's because your creed in land is, hey, it's got to have this, 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 and this. There's not, but it doesn't. And I'm not going to, well, but what about this? There's not, but what if? We don't do that. You don't do that with you. You stick to your line. Now you can tweak and adjust and get better and make it more robust, but there's simple things like you should be as a person. And I'd segue into that because for me, you say, how do they connect with you? I want to be the person somebody needs, that I needed as a kid, as I needed as a professional, as I needed as a younger land investor, as I've leaded. So that's one of my pieces of my creed is be who you needed. And whether that was, I needed the guy with money, started a funding company. Be the guy that can cash out and break that 4-letter word of land and buy you notes to start the fund. So be the guy that you wanted to buy your first piece of property and you didn't know how to do it. Be that guy for your client who's buying from you. Show them how to do it. Make that happen. So today I get a text from a lady. She bought an early property for me in 2017. And it's a funny story because I bought it. It was an old tax auction property I bought from a guy, and the house was falling down on it. I didn't even realize it had a house. I could see it on satellite. But I went and looked at the property, and I was like, man, there's an old house here. And there was a big old snake that slithered by me, and it scared me, and I jumped. And this lady bought it. She had sold her house. They had a little RV, and they moved up there. Well, I said, hey, it has an old house. It has old septic water. So I hooked up rural water for them, hooked up septic. She goes, can I rebuild the house while I'm paying you? She pays me $200 a month on a 20-year note for this. And I said, by all means, y'all do whatever you want. You own the property. So they rebuilt a house that was on this thing with just spare scraps, and they're putting it together since 2017. Well, she calls me today. She goes, hey, Justin, in the winter it gets slow up here. Her husband works as a forester at a paper mill, and it kind of slows down. She goes, I have $100 to pay you. I know the payment's $200. Can I roll the other $100 to the end?
Yeah.
And I said, she goes, I can pay that, but I have to pay the electric bill. I have the payment amount, but I need to pay the electric bill too. It's always slow this time of year. I'm doing whatever I can to hustle. And I said, hey, tell you what, Merry Christmas. This payment's made for you. We'll catch up next month. Have a good day. The good thing is I'm involved in my creed, be who you need it sometimes. They needed a month. She's been paying me since 2017 on 20-year amortization on $10,000. So
it makes no difference to you, but it really does to her. Yeah.
But for her, I've got a client that's rebuilt a house on this property with everything they have. They put their blood, sweat, and tears in it. So we're able to give back in that realm. We're able to do things that, a bank doesn't have the heart to do. So again, when we talk about our creed and who we are and what we want to do, I want to have that conversation because everything you do needs to have purpose in a way. And I'm not saying that in a biblical way. I'm not going to go give away a bunch of money. I'm going to do this. But you can help. You can give opportunity. You can be that voice of reason or that little bit of knowledge. And what I have found,
what I hear you too saying is like, for me, what I think is like impact, right? It's like purpose, but it's also you want to make an impact. That's me. Like I want to make an impact in somebody's life, right? To where it's not just a deal. It's not just this or that, or it's like, hey, he taught me this. Like it's not about the process or the strategy or the tactics. It's more like, did I make a difference? Did I make an impact in your life to the point where you'll be telling a buddy or family or kids even about it? If it, like we know, if they take this and run with it like we have, it can be life-changing, maybe even like for at least a generation, I would say. I'm not going to say generational, but at least it should change your kid's life if you're doing this right. I love that when that gives you more reason, more drive, like having a purpose. The bank account's the scoreboard, and based on interest rates and administration changes, right? That goes ups and down and fluctuates, but the purpose should remain the same. Sweet. Well, let's put a pin in this. What's a good website or handle, or how should people reach out to you, and why should they reach out to you?
Man, if you're interested in if you're an accredited investor and you're interested in passive income, and 11% sounds great to you, reach out to me at pastureholdings.com. Pastureholdings.com. If you just want to listen to the podcast, casualfridaysrei.com. You can reach out on Instagram there as well. If you just want to follow the regular journey, Instagram's the best place. I share everything on Instagram. It automatically goes to Facebook, but J_J_Sliva, and you get a real life. I'm not selling you anything. I very rarely talk about land on my personal Instagram. It's all family and just life in general. And you're going to get the weird vibe of this guy actually coaches people for money because he doesn't talk about it. He doesn't sell it. The land, you might see me at my truck out there with my kids, because if it's within driving,
posting a picture of him and his son hunting, right?
Yeah, and that's on a 258 acre, like $5 million subdivide, right? Yeah. And so I'm taking my kid out there hunting, and both my boys got to go out there, and they're going to remember that forever. They're going to remember he shot his first doe, and he's 11, he's 60 pounds. He shoots him with an AR-15 because it has less recoil for him. Takes him in one shot at about 75 yards. And I have never seen a kid squeal with such excitement. As soon as he pulled that trigger and that deer laid down, it hit him right. The deer laid instantly. And people were like, "Oh, don't hunt. That's bad. Kill it." My son's getting to learn about anatomy. He's getting to learn about feeding his family. So we go pick up the meat tonight, actually, at the processor. So he's going to get to hand food out to some neighbors and see what it is to give back to the community.
So people are getting a Glassdoor look, a real look at you, the person, not just the educational guru, right?
Not the education, not some guru, not some guy that's trying to tote all this millions and millions of dollars and blah, blah, blah. That's not what it is. I believe in being very real on there. And so anyway, those places you can get a hold of me with an email or just a direct message on the Instagrams there.
Sweet. Well, and what I would tell people, if you're driving, don't pull up your phone in front of your face and try to visit all these things. We're going to link to every bit of this, right? We'll link back to all your websites, your companies, everything.
Cool.
So we'll have that go to travisking.com, go to the podcast, check out this episode webpage, and we'll link to all Justin, because he's like me. We wish there were one easy link, right? But we're going to link to all his different ventures and everything he's got going on. Hey, thanks, Justin, man. Really appreciate your time, dude, setting aside the time today, and congrats on everything you're doing, but not just in the business world. Congrats to like being a dad, being a husband, being present, getting your kids out there hunting, doing all that stuff. I grew up in Montana with my dad. So these memories, man, these are anchor memories. They'll stick with your boys, your kids. Yep. So good job balancing that, because it's not easy. It's easy to let the entrepreneur or the growth of the companies overtake and infiltrate life, but you found a way to have a good balance of keeping your priorities, man. So congrats and thanks for coming on.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it. We'll talk to y'all soon.
Right. Thanks for tuning into The King Show. If you enjoyed today's episode, I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Also, don't forget to head over to travisking.com for show notes, resources, bonus content, and more ways to connect with me and the guests that you hear on the show. Remember, greatness is already within you. It's time for you to boss up and claim it. Stop building someone else's empire and start building your own.